Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Brad Nelson, and this is going to be the first run at recording over one of my MPL matches. Now, the Magic Pro League is a weekly league where the top Magic players in the world face off against each other. They go for about 5 weeks each season, and whoever's in the top of their 8-player split gets an advantage at the next big Arena Mythic Championship. So this is the first time that we've done this, and this is the third match in my split. Now, I've already played 2 matches previously, and I was 2-0 at the time of playing this match against Shouta, which is one of the best players of all time, honestly. I've had many encounters against him. I've come out ahead through a lot of luck, and that might be a little bit of foreshadowing going into this, but the match left me shaking by the end of it, and I thought this was a really good learning experience, not only for myself, but for any of you out there that want to watch this as well. So if you don't know who I am, I also do stream at FFFreakMTG, Pacific time, late night, currently, and you can find me on Twitter at FFFreakMTG, and there should be a schedule out there soon. Again, this is going to be my first try at doing one of these, so it might be a little bit rough. In the comments below, please let me know how I did and any ways to improve this model. And if this is something that people like, I might be doing more of these, even with the matches that aren't shown on camera during the broadcast on Saturdays of the MPL weekly matches. Anyway, to get into the match at hand, I am down a game against Shouta playing Bant midrange. Now, I've chosen to play Bant Nexus, and I didn't expect pretty much everyone to show up with Mono Red and Bant midrange. Bant midrange is a bad matchup because not only do they have a lot of the problematic permanents that are good against this deck, including Teferi Time Raveler, but they just have an aggressive curve with counter spells. It's all around bad. And I found myself losing to just early pressure, along with some difficult cards in play, like Teferi Time Raveler in game 1. I had a little bit of misfortune not drawing lands. That's how it goes. So after sideboard, one of the reasons why I chose to play Bant Nexus over Simic Nexus in the first place was access to a card in Deputive Detention. I thought that slowing these games down, being able to interact with problematic permanents is going to be nice, especially if they, like Deputy, are Wilderness Reclamation. Later on in the game, we might be able to Deputy it back, get our Wilderness, and go off. The same thing can be said about Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. A lot of times you can play it, -3, get back a Reclamation, untap, and do the things that you want to do. Effectively, we're just trying to slow the game down until we have a lot of mana and run them out of counterspells, because this deck is very resilient once you get to the late game, because you're able to lower your deck size so your Tamios hit your Nexus more often, and that's really how this engine works. And even if Teferi Time Raveler is in play, you can just win by having, a large amount of mana, let's say 11 mana, one of them being Escanta once you flip to Search, and a Tamio in play, and you can just take every turn. As long as you have a win condition, you'll get there, because you'll be able to build your Tamio up so high, get so many Nexus in hand, build up everything that you can go back into your graveyard, get your Deputive Detention to deal with their Teferi Time Raveler, then unlock your ability to play things at end of turn. Things of that nature. So this is how I sideboarded on the play going into game 2. I still had a couple Root Snares in the deck. It does not work if they have Teferi in play, but you don't want to go too aggressive on Lyras and things like that on the play. You still want to be a combo deck. Now, you might see us, we'll change that going into game 3 for those of you who have watched this, but let's just kick off with the action. We're going to be going over games 2 and 3. I thought those were the more interesting ones. Not a lot of good play decisions in game 1. I just kind of gotten run over, and I don't want this video to go too long. So that's why, I talked for forever. But anyway, not a great start. I'm going to keep this hand because I don't like mulliganing, honestly, and I'm going to have to hope some of my draws are good moving forward anyway. So we're just going to kick things off and hope to draw out of this. Especially if they have, Elf into a Time Raveler. We're almost dead already, and there's not a lot of draws that are going to get us out of that. Growth Chamber Guardian is one of the better cards for this deck to have against us, because it lets them continuously progress their board for cheap while holding counter magic. One of the bigger things in Magic is when you're able to hold up counter magic and still use that mana, and Growth Chamber Guardian does that very well. you don't want to waste mana. And we've already wasted our first 2 turns of mana, whereas our opponent did not. So they're ahead. All right, so Bonds of Flourishing is a great card that comes out of the sideboard for red matchups and other matchups where you become more permanent dense. I've wrote about that in my content on Star City Games about why I have Bonds in the sideboard, along with a sideboard guide. So if you have premium, you can go over to StarCityGames.com and read about that from last week. The decision here is to play a Wilderness Reclamation into a counterspell or just jam to Fairy. Now, our opponent has 2 negates and 2 disdainful strokes as counter magic currently up, while also having 4 Mystic Snakes, well, not Mystic Snakes, Frilled Mystics that'll get unlocked once a 4th land comes down. I decided to just jam here. I don't feel like my chances in this game are that good. I feel like I'm going to get snowballed. So I thought the best chance I have is if they don't have a counterspell, and I'm able to start leveraging that Teferi as not only a life buffer, but card advantage. Now we're kind of in trouble. And I'm already down a game. I was kind of shaking my head during the match. I was just like, oh, this is not like this. I don't want this to be on camera and me just get absolutely destroyed. Alright, so we're going to get a Tamio. Tamio is going to allow us to take some hits from this Frilled Mystic and Growth Chamber and hopefully nothing else. And try to build up a combo.
People, the mysteries of life are endless.
So Vivian comes down, and now this is just another way for Bant midrange to hold up mana while progressing their board. Alright, so here's a good lesson. Always put your stop. But I am going to play this Wilderness, hope they don't have another 2-mana counter, and I'm going to take an extra turn now. Because there's a very good chance that our opponent has a Deputy of Detention that takes apart all of the work that we're trying to set up. But also, there is a small percentage chance that we just take every turn for the rest of the game. And you want to play to those a lot of the time. So there's nothing in my graveyard for Tamio to bring back. So I'm just going to think about what's the best chance of me winning this game. And honestly, I feel like I'm in a very bad spot, and I feel like I have to get lucky. And when you have to get lucky, you have to get really lucky. And so I ultimately decide to play this Tamio and just name Nexus of Fate and hope I get another turn. Because what are my other choices? If I can take this Tamio down to play another spell, but then it's just going to die. If this bricks, it forces them to use mana next turn to pump the Growth Chamber and hope to hit something else. Also, if I brick on this, I can also just hit a Chemist's Insight and get some card advantage. Luckily, though, I hit 2 Nexus of Fates. And there's Shouta. Oops. Alright, so we're going to play another Nexus. Now, during coverage, this was the turn where a lot of people thought I might have made a mistake. And maybe I did, and you can tell me in the comments below what you thought of it. But if you look, I only have 6 cards in my graveyard with only the possibility of getting back to 6 if I take Tamio down to hit the Search for a Skanta. But that would allow me to activate it next turn, but it would stay in play and be at risk of getting hit by another Deputy before I ultimately got to flip it again. I could also go get a Hero of Dominaria and put that into play, which is also a great play. But it lowers my chances of, again, hitting a Chemist's Insight or just getting lucky and hitting another Nexus of Fate, and lowering my library density to have the combo. So since I have another turn, I want to take this Tamio up, and I want to get Search for a Skanta. Those are 2 things I want to do. So if that's what I want to do to give myself the highest likelihood of comboing off, it's to tick this Tamio up and just go for Nexus again. I can also hit a Chemist's Insight, which I did not, and I can ultimately hit another Nexus and potentially just win from there on. If I was able to hit one. And I get this draw step. Now, the draw step does not yield much. There's an argument for putting the Blast Zone on to protect the Tamio. But at this point, if I get Search into play, and I have Wilderness Reclamation in play, now all I have to do is have a Blast Zone on 3 for their deputies, and I'm going to be able to resolve the activation of Search for Askanta flipping into Askanta and be able to generate a lot of card advantage, potentially just winning the game. And since I know my opponent doesn't have a 2-mana counterspell and they have to dig for another 4-mana counterspell in the form of Frilled Mystic, I take a very passive line this turn, and I just go get Search for Askanta.
No
And I'm gonna
should be discarded.
play this, and I'm going to, I believe I Blast Zone and put 2 charge counters on it, putting it at 3. Another thing the commentators missed is they thought that I put it at 2 when I put it at 3. I think. Did I screw this up? I'm pretty sure I have it on 3. Yes. And this is just setting the game up to know that the 2 cards that I'm most scared of our opponent playing before Search for Askanta flips is either Teferi Time Reveler or a Deputy of Detention. That's how I believe that I just stone cold lose the game. I still could lose the game to counter magic. Another question here is, why didn't I play the other Wilderness Reclamation? Well, there's 2 reasons. I don't mind one getting deputied. I'll ignore that because I have a secondary. Also, next turn, if our opponent does have a counter spell, they might just have to say, hey, I just need to hit this Wilderness Reclamation and not the other card. And actually, I would rather take 9 cards off the top of my library to hit a Nexus and then counter Wilderness than get 13 cards to find it and then counter it. If that makes any sense. So I've kept the Wilderness in my hand for 2 reasons. For them to have bait to hit the first one in play with a Deputy of Detention, or the second one for a counter spell.
I have become too involved with my work.
So here, I'm doing some thinking to make sure I shouldn't blow up this Blast Zone now. And there really is no reason to, because it just hits the Vivian, and I can always respond to the Deputy with blowing it up if our opponent chooses to play it. Alright, we're going to keep that on top, obviously. We're going to transform. And we're just in a perfect spot right now. So we're going to play the Wilderness Reclamation, because if that is successful, we just get to go completely off. And we still, right now I'm just making sure I have enough mana to activate the Blast Zone, which I do. I'm just making sure I don't mess something stupid up. And this is my test spell. And for those of you who don't know what a test spell is the weaker spell you cast to try to get them to counter it. Now, in this format, Teferi Time Reveler is always just the first spell and the test spell, and just the optimal play, because if they don't counter it, then they can't counter the next card anyway. Excuse me. So here we're going to, we know our opponent's deck list, and we know they don't have anything for 2 mana that is problematic except for maybe a Nexus of Fate. But it's still nice to always put things on the stack like this first, instead of just going for it. But we hit a Nexus, and we feel like they don't have a counter. So we're just going to play this Nexus of Fate. And we're going to play another Askanta, find another Nexus, and I believe we do this for a little bit. We just go off. Our opponent does nothing, doesn't have anything, and we just gain an advantage. Now we go to sideboarding for game 3 with them on the play. That's always the harder spot. On the play, Teferi Time Reveler isn't good enough to just sneak into play on turn 3 and bounce something and protect our 4-drop. So we have to take more drastic measures. We have to kind of increase our curve and get a little bit more aggressive against our opponent. And that's when I bring in Lyra on the draw. And sometimes God Eternal Kefnet. Usually God Eternal Kefnet is good against the red-based decks, Gruul or Mono-Red Aggro. And I've liked having 2 for them, but I found the matchup to actually be surprisingly good. Good enough to where I think I have like a 92 record. I also beat Christian Hawk last week on Mono-Red playing this deck as well in league play. 2-0, and I've just done well in the matchup, so I don't really worry about adding another card for it. I've just been trying to figure out how to beat the other decks with this. And the problem is I don't know how the time clock is going to change this in play. What's frustrating about timed Magic on Arena is that people will now be incentivized to play it out against Nexus, whereas like the deck just has free wins, and people concede pretty early. Like we're going to game 3, and we've been playing, as you can see on the thing, for 20 minutes. It's not that bad, especially for deck like this. Anyway, our opponent mulligans. We kept our hand with turn 2 Askanta, but it's not perfect, but our opponent was on a mulligan, and it's good enough to keep. Drawing Deputy Detention was really nice. Seeing our opponent on an Elf card advantage draw, like going Elf into Vivian, is not good, because this is going to get that card advantage back that they lost in their mulligan. Another reason that makes this deck good is because it has card advantage Planeswalkers on 3.
You fight like a city brat.
I don't know what a city brat is, but I do feel like one. I don't like the outdoors, and whenever I go camping, I can only go without internet for 8 hours, so I guess I would be a city brat. A city Brad. We're going to keep this. Deputy of Detention, like I said earlier, is this phenomenal card that just gets in the way of their early development. Because one of the things they want to do is put pressure and then have counterspells. And you're just trying to be annoying with it. You're not trying to win the game with it. You're not even... Sometimes it's not even good enough to put that big of a dent in the gameplay itself. But it's enough to just be annoying. And right now we're seeing that with our opponent playing Deputy on our Deputy so that they can keep Vivian and not hit our search for Askanta, which is a card that is one of our best win conditions in a matchup like this.
There is wonder in a blade of grass.
All right. From all points, this is not a bad board position to be in because our opponent is not hitting us for like 7 damage already, which sometimes they can do. If it was Elf into the 2-drop, things could be a whole lot worse. Tough decision point here. I'm not going to pause it because I think for a while. Do we play Deputy and get our Deputy back and hit Lanarels, or do we just try to get a Tamio into play? The questions are, do we beat Frilled Mystic if we go Deputy into Tamio? We just play Tamio and we get it killed, or we drop down to 8 life. Potentially it gets ignored and we die. So ultimately I decide if our opponent has Frilled Mystic, we have to play a Tamio as our spell now, get that countered, and then play a Deputy and hope that can like hold the board, because we need to hold board position to try to win this game. And so while it feels like if our opponent has nothing, either play is going to work, but if our opponent has exactly Frilled Mystic, I think we have to go Tamio into Deputy. And so I decide to shock and play. Luckily for us, our opponent does not have Frilled Mystic. They in fact just have a 2-mana counterspell. Well, I mean, they could have nothing, and that would be way better. I love it when my opponent mulligans and has nothing. But we're not in a bad board position. We can win this game.
Tear it all down.
All right, another land, and just 2 cards. Having access to 2 cards means that I feel really good about this game. All right, so this is a turn where we can play Tamio, but like I said, I don't want to risk the Tamio to another counterspell. I'd rather get annoying this turn and slow this game down. So I'm going to hit Deputy to get back a Deputy, and now my options are to hit Vivian or Lanarelves. The reason I chose to hit Lanarelves is I could theoretically keep that Vivian at bay. Also, if they have nothing, they might tick it down and just exhaust it. But if I hit the Vivian and then they somehow Deputy, they can like reuse that Vivian multiple times and give it a re-up on loyalty, and that's something I would rather not happen. So yeah, like there's a play where I hit the Vivian, and if Shouta has a Deputy, they might just let it resolve and then Deputy on their turn and get that Vivian back up to 4. So Incubation Druid is like whatever. It's just like the threat that exists now after being pumped. That's fine. And now that happens, we'll play a shock land and say go. I'm feeling really good about this. I'm at 11 life. That's a high life total. And oh my god, we're in trouble. So now the deputies get exiled underneath that deputy. This deputy hits our search, and our opponent is threatening to attack us for 7 life, dropping us to 4. Now we're almost dead. We have to draw land. If we don't draw land, we just lose the game.
Strike now. Strike hard.
It's so crazy how just one land drop is the difference in this game. But I draw it, and I make a punt. I just, for some reason, think that I have to shock here. I don't even know why. To cast the Nexus. It's it's a total brain fart. I'm not playing around Spell Pierce. I'm not playing around anything. I just made a mistake. I could have played it tapped, floated 1 mana with this Wilderness Reclamation, and then had 7 mana for the Nexus. It's just a bad play. And I was embarrassed about it going into the tournament, but in fact, the commentators were judging me on different plays and just ignored this one. So that's good. Drawing Blast Zone is good and bad. But we actually have a sweet play here where we can charge a Blast Zone up to 3 and then sacrifice, and then untap it with Wilderness Reclamation, and then sacrifice it, getting back all 3 of our permanents, which exile their other 3 permanents. So because we drew a land last turn, we're now able to just kind of just go off and swing the game completely in our favor, even though we're at 2 life. This is just phenomenal. So we're going to float some mana and hold up another Blast Zone. Now we have the ability to charge the other Blast Zone up to 3 if we need it to, but we just got back our deputies and our search for a Skanta. I think we only have like 4 cards in our graveyard though, so we can't flip it. So our opponent still has 1 card hidden away that could be a creature or could not. It could just be a dead card. And chooses to play a Growth Chamber card. At this point, with how this game's playing, I'm starting to ignore that last card. But it's, in fact, a deputy. Okay, so that comes down. And now if Shouta chooses to target my deputy and get all their cards back, I can again charge it up to 3 and then pop it and then get all of their stuff again. So instead, Shouta is going to go for Search or Wilderness Reclamation. I'm hoping Shouta goes for Wilderness Reclamation, actually, because Search for Skanta is going to be the way that I win this game. Because I'm so low resourced, I don't really care about the extra mana right now. I just want to be able to flip that Search. Plus, I could always get it back, right? If I get enough resources in play, I can always get it back with this Blast Zone. I'm debating between 1 or 2 on the Blast Zone, but I ultimately decide to just charge it 1 for this turn, which can... Now, I'm devising the plan that... Alright, so if our opponent draws nothing, we can play our Tamio. And... Here we go, yep. We can play our Tamio, and we have to figure out what we're going to name. We can name Nexus, we can name Deputy Detention, we can name Teferi, we can name Interaction, or we can name Combo. But if we brick or if things go south, what we can do is we can block with this Deputy Detention that has Incubation Druid, give them back their 2 creatures, have a Blast Zone that can kill both of them so they don't have an Assault again, and we could even Tamio get back the Deputy Detention that we have put into our graveyard, which then allows us to get back our Wilderness and start using our Skanta plus Wilderness Reclamation. So this doesn't want to get a combo piece. This wants to get an interaction piece to try to help make sure that we slow the game down long enough. And I choose Deputy because Deputy is the only card that makes sure we live through the turn even if everything goes badly. Because we still die this game if our opponent draws exactly Deputy of Detention. They take both of our deputies, leaving us with no blocker for the Growth Chamber. So this was the last turn I really felt like I had a chance of losing this game. Every other turn I felt pretty bad. Actually, the swings were stressful, not stressful, stressful, not stressful. And now that the attack is coming in and this is happening, we just block with this deputy. We give back the incubation druid. Our opponent also has to use mana to go get it, so this stops them from having Frilled Mystic outs if they pump. I didn't bring that up. Because if they drew Frilled Mystic, they can't keep mana up for both. Since that Incubation Druid has Summoning Sickness. Alright, so now we wait to see what our opponent does. Our opponent just says go, which is really interesting to me. I mean, they don't want to play it into just getting blown up by Blast Zone. So that's why at first I was like, are they bluffing a counter that hard? Or it's like, oh no, they don't want to get everything wrathed. All right, so that's a dead draw, but it's not the worst, right? So like I said, we still have an Azcanta activation and we have a Tamio activation. And Tamio can go let us have an Azcanta going. So we have to think through all of our options. And ultimately, what could they punish us with? Now, if we go get Teferi and it gets countered, we are in theoretical trouble. We can still blow the Blast Zone, which saves us. But if we just go get Deputy, it can't get countered and allows us to get Wilderness and multiple activations off of our Azcanta, which sounds a whole lot better. So Teferi is the high end, like the higher ceiling card to go get right now, because that'll leave us with a Planeswalker and play later. But if they drew a 2-mana counterspell, which is the best card they could have drawn, we walk right into it by getting that Teferi. Whereas we can still win the game by using this Deputy to get Wilderness and blowing up Blast Zones on the other two things. If they drew a counter, we will have more advantages that way. So we're going to wait till the end of turn, and then we'll get this Azcanta. We'll wait for the trigger just to make sure there's nothing we're missing. Just optimal play, because we're not going to put like a Search for Azcanta into play if we hit it anyway. Because we need the mana to activate both of our lands. And then we're just going to blow these up right now. And the reason I'm blowing them up right now is just because I'm going to have to do it anyway. And they're not going to do anything with it. It just gives them an extra mana if they want it. Waiting for their turn is only giving them 1 mana. And that's not worth giving to them, even though they have 6 and low resources. Because we weren't going to block. Our opponent shocked, and that was just like a desperation shock. Like, I don't believe that they have a negate, and I don't think it's going to matter. I think we have exactly the resources that we need to win this game, even through a negate. But you're going to see, let's just assume, because our opponent has Growth Chamber Guardian, which gives them stops, let's assume that this game at this current spot is in real life. I am going to show you to find the most passive line possible that changes the math from like a 90, I don't know math, I'm making up numbers, 98.5% chance to win to a 99% chance to win. Like some outrageously low micro percentage increase. I'm going to go and I'm going to tick down and get a Tamio. Now, if this Tamio gets countered, we still have a Nexus Fate and we have Azcantas.
Past is never forgotten.
Now, I'm going to tick this one down and get a Fog. And the reason I'm doing that is, what happens if I brick on this Azcanta and our opponent draws exactly, has exactly Negate in hand and draws exactly Deputy Detention? We lose the game if we brick on this Azcanta and we don't draw anything of relevance. So if they have those, we at least get to Fog during their upkeep and have a whole nother turn of doing crazy stuff. So now we're going to play Nexus. And now if this got countered, we get to pass the turn and upkeep, play Root Snare when they have 0 cards in hand and they can't deal damage to us, and then try to go off again next turn, which our library is lowering and all of these things. So that's just one of those little plays that I often do in Magic. I often take this really this like I just take those little lines, those little like micro. I can re-up on this Tamio to keep a Tamio in play, and I can get this fog just to make sure that if anything goes wrong, some people might just tick that Tamio up, brick, search, brick, play the Nexus, it gets countered, you know, and they snowball. And now this game, it's going to be really difficult for anyone to ever lose it. But there's a lot of games where the numbers aren't at 98% or 99%. They're at 75%, 80%, 90%. And one of the things I see a lot of players do is they get a little loose when they're winning, and they're not trying to maximize like their potential chance of winning the game because they think it's so high it doesn't matter. And then sometimes I've won those games. We've seen people win those games. You've probably lost those games. You probably won those games against opponents that, you know, are getting a little loose with their spells. And then all of a sudden they hit a land clump, and all of a sudden you draw exactly the best 3 cards in your deck to get you back into a game, and you get there. And then you go back to playing a Magic again, or you just win the game. And so that's why I took that line. It seems, you know, from a performance standpoint, you know, everyone's like, wow, Brad finally got back into this game and finally got there. And I do the most irrelevant thing, which is, you know, tuck a Tamio to go get a different one, or sacrifice Tamio to get a different one, and then go get Root Snare, of all things. But I think that is one of the more important decision trees on this game. But if I could bring back anything, it's just the way I played this game was that I was trying to slow it down as long as I could get to this board position. And I think that's the way you have to play these decks. You can't go into these Bant matchups, these Bant mid-range matchups, and try to brute force your way into them. Sometimes that'll work, sometimes it won't. I mean, sometimes you have to do that and it won't work. But if you can slow the game down just long enough to where you can stabilize and get to a board similar to this or something like that, and then present your combo, that's how you're going to win the game. You're not going to win it on turn 5 or 6 like you do against mono red. You're going to win it on turn 11, 12, 13 when resources have been depleted and you've hopefully, you know, slogged through everything and just got there. But anyway, that's the video for today. Let me know if you liked it in the comments, if you'd like it to be a little bit slower, longer, whatever. This is the first one. I haven't done one of these before. And I just want to see if this is an avenue worth exploring or not. Again, with my other MPL matches throughout the year, there will be many of them. And this is something I could see just sitting down and spending 20 minutes on. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the comments, and I'll see you next week when I try to pull ahead in the, I think, the Emerald division. Anyway, talk soon.